Hello there to those of you seeking truth. This is Derek. Today's video is going to be a little different. I'm going to be talking about ritualistic murders that occurred this week, one of them being in my own hometown. You see, the kitty gloves are off. You'll notice that my face is on the screen. This is because I want people to know I'm very serious, and there needs to be a real face to these accusations. Plus, if anything ends up happening to me, you'll know exactly why. So for the second year in a row, the date 322 gave us a false flag in Europe. 322 kilometers exactly from last year's 322 false flag in Brussels. But that's not why I'm making this video. 322 is a date ripe for killing by Freemasons all over the globe, not just the ones in these big false flags, but all the way down to your local Masonic lodges. I will present this as if you're somewhat familiar with Gematria. If you're not, I recommend watching Signs of Time. This is my hour-plus presentation linked below. Because many of the same numbers in time and numbers of Saturn are key to what you will be seeing here. Now, this topic requires an investment of time, something many people don't want to hear. But this is why the Masons work so hard to feed us with all sorts of entertainment, from TV, movies, rigged sports, and video games, so we don't seek knowledge and see what's really happening. Because what's really happening is that a terrorist network of individuals is living and thriving among us. And they pose a much greater threat to our safety than any religious zealot you'll ever see on your television. If you think it's crazy to suggest that ritual murders are occurring right under our noses, perhaps you should check out another link I listed below, which is a recent episode of the Dr. Phil Show. In this episode, a woman who was trafficked by dark occultists talks about the man who owns her, a wealthy businessman who she witnessed murder well over a dozen people. She talks about lawyers, doctors, politicians, sports owners being part of this cabal who regularly kill people for their own sick pleasure and satanic practices. They tend not to kill randomly. Instead, they practice murder by numbers, although probably not exclusively. The significance of 322 and its variants has to do with its relation to 777. As you can see, 223 plus 232 plus 322, when you mix these numbers up, sum to 777. Now, Genesis 322 mentions man becoming like God. And that's what these ritual murders are all about. The creator of the universe works by numbers, and by killing people by the numbers, occultists believe that they then become like God and obtain powers, or at least something to that effect. So let's look at Genesis 3:22. The first half of this in the Bible sums to 322. Right now we're looking at the King James Version. The NIV version, same thing. The first half of the verse sums to 322 in reverse reduction. This is a very significant verse in the Bible. So let's look at the Gematria of Ostara. Ostara is a pagan holiday that occurs around the spring equinox. And in Jewish Gematria, this sums to 322. In a new cipher that I just discovered yesterday, I call this Jewish Ordinal. 22nd of March sums to 223, the inverse of 322. Now let's first discuss some of these numbers that continuously pop up around killings and murders. First of all, notice this 93 here. That's our Saturn number, 93 in English ordinal. Let's start off with the word dead. Dead sums to 14 in several ciphers and 22. Notice this 22 in reverse reduction. This matches words like tomb, dying, and died, all 22. The 22nd prime number is 79, like murder. This matches words like mortal, which is 79, and morgue, also 79, words that have to do with death. When I punch dead back in, I'm going to turn on our Kabbalah ciphers, and you'll see that the number 38 appears in both. When we go back to the word murder, you'll see we have a 38 in reverse reduction and an 83 in reverse ordinal. Also 38 is RIP in reverse. And the word death sums to 38 in English ordinal. You'll also see that death sums to 118 in Jewish gematria. That's the same as the word homicide, 118. Next, let's look at the word kill. You'll see kill has gematria of 17 and 59. These numbers are directly related, as 59 is the 17th prime number. 59 also appears in many other words that have to do with death, like dying, buried in ordinal, and the word grave in both of our Kabbalah ciphers sums to 59 as well. Take another look here at the word kill. 44 in English ordinal, very significant number, because when we type out 44, we get 144, like the number of time that we're so familiar with by now. Killer in Jewish gematria also equals 144. But next, let's look at the gematria of the word killing, and this is where it gets really interesting. We see a 38 like we're familiar with. But also notice the 43, 74, and 115. This 115 is significant because it's both reverse ordinal and the Jewish cipher. 115 is related to 223 because if you type in 115 plus 151 plus 511, again you get 777. But watch what happens when I drop the word Masonic in over killing. You'll see almost nothing changes, except notice how it went to 223 using Jewish gematria. Also very similar to the word Lucifer, 3843, 74, 115. And you'll notice a 323 here in the Jewish cipher, but watch what happens when I turn on the prime number cipher. Lucifer is 223. You see this 110 here? This is another number that has to do with death here in the prime cipher. So again, we're very familiar with this Skull and Bones logo and their favorite number 322 with the skull and crossbones above it. Skull and crossbones sums to 223. Also notice this 61 in reduction and 110 in reverse reduction. It's a lot like Grim Reaper, which is 61 and 110 as well. So with some of this information out of the way, let's look at some of these deaths that occurred on 3/22/2017. So most of the murders I'll be discussing are just regular people, but first let's look at this semi-celebrity death of Jan Ross, the wife of former WWE commentator Jim Ross. There have been a string of sacrifices leading up to WrestleMania 33, the number of Masonic obsession, and I believe this is no different. Ross is dead at the age of 55, a significant number that has to do with the Fibonacci sequence, triangular numbers, as you can see here, the 10th of both, and the gematria of God and Satan. 55, when written out, equals 343. This number is very significant because 7 times 7 times 7 equals 343. This headline here sums to 144 in reverse reduction, like killer. Remember, these media outlets are part of the same gang as the police who are supposed to be investigating these crimes. They are every bit as complicit in covering these killings up as the people who are committing them. This notice was posted at 6:22 p.m. That's the 1102nd minute of the day. Freemason equals 112, and its inverse 211 is represented by words like Mason and killing in our prime cipher. The writer of this article, here, Adam S. Levy, is appropriate to be reporting on a death like this. His name also sums to 343, using the prime cipher. If you leave out his middle initial, you get 83, our murder number, along with 133, one of the numbers closely associated with the passage of time. Jan Ross was married to Jim Ross in 93, our number of Saturn, also one of our murder numbers. Her name sums to 93 in reverse ordinal. The accident happened in Norman, Oklahoma. Norman sums to 33, reverse reduction. A lot of these other numbers, like 77 and 69, you're going to see pop up a lot as well, but I'm not going to touch on those so much. Norman, OK, when written like this, gives us 93 in our KFW cipher, but also see 115 reverse ordinal, 43 reverse reduction, and 33 full reduction. More numbers associated with killing that we continue to see. Even if we type out the entire name of the state, Norman, Oklahoma, we get 74 in reverse reduction and 227 in reverse ordinal. If you saw signs of time, you know 22 divided by 7 equals pi, representing the cycle of time. What I noticed about this too is that there's 373 shares. Why is this significant? 373 is the 74th prime number. Ross was killed when she was riding a Vespa. Vespa sums to 83. According to this article, she was hit by a 17-year-old male. A 17-year-old, remember 17 being one of the numbers of kill, as we can see here. But 17-year-old sums to 227 in our Kabbalah cipher. Probably no coincidence. In fact, just 17 written out like this sums to 44 in reverse reduction. They say he was coming back from a local gym, somewhere in this article. Local gym sums to 34, 38. Also notice this 88. And notice they didn't say he was working out. We don't see any of our numbers here. They didn't say he was exercising. They didn't say he was at the gymnasium. They phrase these for a particular reason. It's because local gym gives numbers that tie into this event. They say he was driving a Mercury Grand Marquis. Let's take a look at the gematria of this. Sums to 115 in reverse reduction, 233 in our KFW cipher, and if we turn on trigonal numbers, you'll see 2207. Hard to believe that this is a coincidence. When Jim Ross was asked about this, he said he's absolutely devastated. And this is what another thing they do. They twist their words. 118 in reverse reduction, 233 in ordinal. Remember, this is a very significant number as well, as it's the 13th Fibonacci and the 51st prime number. But what I also found out about this quote is that in satanic gematria, this phrase sums to 933, which is the exact time of the crash. Ross says that the situation is touch and go. Again, 144 KFW, and our prime cipher, 331. Let me turn this satanic off here. So, after they announced her death, they said that she was not wearing a helmet, which arguably would have prevented the extreme nature of her injuries. That exact quote, when we gematronate it, first of all sums to 318. Remember, 7 divided by 22 gives us the number 318. Also notice this hidden 33 in full reduction. Remember, in numerology, we ignore zeros. Likewise, reverse ordinal 903, just like this 93 number we continue to see. Funny how she was hit so closely to 9:30 p.m. as well. But what's so sick about this, here's a picture of the tweet that TMZ put up. Notice the number of likes, 8338. Reminds us of that murder, which equals 3883 in reverse. This announcement was followed up by a tweet from Ric Flair. First of all, Ric Flair always shows up in these deaths of wrestlers, it seems, tweeting or whatever. Well, Nature Boy Ric Flair sums to 223 in Kabbalah, so perhaps this is the reason why we continue to see him. But notice the time of his tweet. It came at 6:28 p.m. That is the 1108th minute of the day, 118 being our death homicide number. Hard to imagine that these are all coincidences. This next story we're going to look at was a mass shooting in northern Wisconsin, and this looks like one of our classic hoax false flag shootings. This happened in Weston, Wisconsin. Let's start off by looking at the gematria of Weston in all forms. You'll notice I changed one of the ciphers here. I took the Jewish one out and I added single reduction, which is the same as full reduction except s equals 10 instead of 1 because you're only reducing it once. Weston sums to 33 in single reduction, 322, our favorite number in primes. And don't forget the 96, like Freemason, and 66, like when you write 33, you get 66. When we say Weston, Wisconsin with the WI abbreviation, we get 38, one of our murder numbers, and 88, like the cycle of time. Don't forget about this 112 as well. But if we just type out Weston, Wisconsin in full, you'll notice in the trigonal cipher we get 1998, which you'll see is going to come up in a minute. The state of Wisconsin is one of two states that sums to 44 in reduced gematria, also 55 in reverse reduction. Wisconsin also sums to 118 in reverse ordinal. So a very ripe place for killing on a date like this. This incident began in Rothschild, which sums to 55. And think about that. One of the biggest banking families in the entire world who's responsible for this New World Order agenda. And of course, it starts there, probably as a little bit of a tribute. And going down here, and these stories are coded. All of them. First of all, let's take one of the quotes. They say it was a domestic incident. Well, of course, we get a 113, our number for mainstream and dishonesty. And 139, a little nod to the Freemasons, possibly, as Freemasonry, of course, sums to 139. The next quote, same paragraph, it evolved into tragic crimes. What does that give us? How about a 115 for killing? And a 137 in reverse reduction. 137, that 33rd prime number. One of those killed in this attack was an attorney. Of course, 44, 118 gematria as well, just like Wisconsin. So, look at the names of the victims in this, and I want to mention that they've since added the middle initials to this story. I'm going to put them in here as they were originally reported, just their first and last names. First of all, Karen Barclay. You see this 111 in ordinal? That means in Sumerian it's 666. We also have a 133 in one of our Kabbalah ciphers. Sarah Quirt San, 55 in reduction. Diane Look, 46 full reduction. And when we add the K exception, we get 55. This 4655 seems to be a theme. Jason Weiland, the officer killed in this, also 4655. Remember, sacrifice is 4655 with the 133 from the ALW cipher as well. Even the witnesses, one of these witnesses, Kelly Hansen, her name, 4655. One of the other witnesses, Janet Schoenfeld, her name is 223 in both the ALW and KFW ciphers. No coincidence indeed. They mention one other officer's name in this story. They say Jason Smith. Plug this in and don't really see anything, which is why we have these additional ciphers. Sometimes you've got to dig. A 55 and a 1018 in the full Jewish gematria. All right, so this officer, they say, he was on the job for 18 years in law enforcement, 18 years, all in the Wausau area, including the last 15 with the Everest Metro Police Force. Do I need to do this? 18 plus 15 is 33. And they refer to this officer in many different ways throughout the course of this article. At one point, they mention that he is an Everest Metro officer, which gives us gematria of 110, 227, and 331. They also refer to him by Jason T. Weiland, including his middle initial. See this 48, 147? This is the same as Freemason in reverse, 48, 147. He was a detective. They put detective abbreviated in front of his name. This sums to 66 in reduction and 156 in ordinal, just like 33, 66, 156. Finally, they at one point call him by his entire title, Everest Metro Police Detective Jason Weiland. This sums to 193, that's the 44th prime number. And also notice this 555. This is one of the numbers that seems to be most significant to the occult. And I never really quite understood why. However, when you type out 555 and open up this new Jewish ordinal cipher, you see a 223. Makes a little more sense now of the Washington Monument height, all the details about the Pentagon. I think there's really something to it, and I'll probably be doing a video on this at some point. This incident started at a bank. Bank sums to 44 in ALW, but more specifically it was Marathon Savings Bank. What do you know? 11574. Two numbers associated closely with killing, 74 and 115. Also, the bank, when I turn on the trigonal cipher, sums to 1722, reminding of that 227 we keep seeing. The spokesman for the bank, I believe it's on this page, his name is Nicholas Zilgis, or Zilgis. And his name, when we open up the Francis Bacon cipher that accounts for capital letters, his name sums to 223. The shooting ended up at Aspen Street Apartments. In our septenary cipher, which goes up 1 through 7 and back down, we see the 88. Witness Kelly Hansen, who lives in the complex, told the AP that she looked out her apartment window at around 1:15 p.m. Wednesday. Look at the details here. She saw a squad car approach. A few seconds later, heard a gunshot, saw an officer fall. Up, 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 up. She said the other officers put the wounded policeman in an armored SWAT vehicle and took him away. I'm picturing one of those cartoon scenes where someone drops dead and they come in with a gurney and lift him away. How do we know anything really happened to this guy? She couldn't tell if he was alive or dead. Probably just plain dead. The head of the Department of Justice in the area, he's a spokesperson. His name is Johnny Koromonos. His name sums to a familiar 211 in KFW. 211, the 47th prime number. And think how many judges, how many figures of authority have 47 gematria. This man also states towards the end that the $25,000, I believe, is the goal for donations. That's what the bank is matching, the first $25,000. $25,000 in gematria sums to 343, like 7 times 7 times 7. Just looks like another hoax to me. This next murder from 3/22 that I'll be covering here occurred in Centennial, Colorado. Before I talk about this, I want to real quickly talk about Denver, Colorado, and its international airport. Everyone knows by now that Denver is home of the 303 area code. And the Denver International Airport contains, as far as we know, the largest underground bunker in the country. And Denver International Airport sums to 137 and reduced, again the 33rd prime number. But I want to make a case for this Jewish reduced cipher because Denver doesn't seem to have too many connections to 33 until you look at it this way. So Denver sums to 33, as does Colorado, 33. So there's multiple orders to this alphabet, and we're just cracking the code to some of them. First of all, this murder happened in Centennial. And Centennial has gematria of 43, full reduction, and 38 in Jewish reduced. Also 97, one of our death numbers. The state, Colorado, sums to 38 and 33. Remember, just like murder in reverse. Centennial CO sums to 115, our killing number. And if we unlock the trigonal cipher, you'll see 811, the inverse of 118. This is also the 141st prime number. Fully written out, Centennial Colorado sums to 232 in the Francis Bacon cipher. We're familiar with 232 as the gematria of Saturn. All right, so this murder happened at the 7,000 block of South Jordan Road. 7,000 sums to 1333 in Jewish gematria. These two numbers have a very strong esoteric connection. This was on South Jordan Road. Interesting numbers here. We have 66, 139 in ALW, and 187 in KFW. One note I want to make about the number 187, we often hear this referred to as the homicide code, but also notice how in duodecimal, 187 actually sums to 137. This number also has some unique properties. Its prime factors are 11 times 17. This is almost the exact same as its prime number relationship, 1117. There's no other numbers like this. This murder occurred at a place called Quality Electronic or Electrical Distribution, which can be abbreviated as QED. QED has 17, like kill, 55, reverse ordinal, 79 in Jewish, our murder number, and another 34 here in KFW, highly coded abbreviation. And when we type out the full name of this place, you see it sums to 137, that 33rd prime number, and 187 in reverse. So these are not coincidences. This site was clearly chosen for a reason. This place is on the intersection of East Arapahoe Road. It gives us a 55, this time in the septenary cipher, and a 226 Francis Bacon. Of course, 226 sums to 93, one of our murder numbers. As we go down the page here, you'll see the quotes in this article are very carefully constructed to convey a very clear message. First of all, this was the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office that was involved in this. And look at that, 144 both full reduction and reverse reduction. Notice this tweet from Eric Goody came out at 12:57 p.m. 12 times 60 plus 57, that's the 777th minute of the day. This next tweet down here, this one coming from Arapahoe Sheriff, is at 12:13 p.m. And think about the symbolism of 12:13 with 322. So look at these quotes. This is crazy. The first one, it's really too early at this point. And notice how they put to say in parentheses here. So we're not going to include that. Weird words to leave out of the phrase. But here, we see in ordinal, this sums to 383. Think about how Colorado sums to 3883, just like murder. The next quote, same line. Look at this. We'll be out here for quite some time. There's a lot of people left to interview. Let's paste this in, and what do we know? 777 English ordinal. These are not coincidences, people. These people are talking in codes, and they're doing it right under our noses. They say he possibly left the area in an older white sedan, but he didn't say the word the. Again, that's just in parentheses. So we're going to leave that out, drop it in, and see we get 187 in single reduction. This next paragraph is pretty interesting. They say, obviously we are concerned. This gives us 333 in KFW. Another quote, it's going to be a lengthy investigation. This phrase, again, sums to 144, this time in our septenary cipher. And if we open up Chaldean, we get a 118, another nod to death. So this quote here is pretty interesting. We have somebody out there with a gun who just shot and killed someone. Obviously, we are concerned. So if we take just the words that are in quotes, drop these in, we get a 365, like the number of days in a year. Also notice this 393, one of the numbers that when written out sums to 1331. Also notice 1018, like 118 in ALW. Now what's funny about this 393 and 1331 is that if we actually copy Brooks said as part of this phrase and drop it in, we get a 1331 in reverse ordinal. Pretty crafty. So for this next murder, let's go to Baltimore. And just for the record, no, I didn't zoom into this page. They really did put a picture of a face this large here. And this is all part of the race war agenda as well as the transgender gay agenda. And look at this. I'm reading this article, and check out this banner on the bottom of the page. Health and sex belong together. Visit healthysexuals.com. Talk to a healthcare provider. That's two men there. I don't see a woman there. Strange. Anyways, so let's look at this headline. It says, Woman Killed in Baltimore is 8th trans murder victim of 2017. This phrase sums to 193 in our septenary cipher. Again, the 44th prime number. This was written by a woman called Trudy Ring. She has 55 and 118 gematria on her name. And this woman, Alphonsa Watson, died at the age of 38, like murder. And check out this name. First of all, she was the 8th murder. Just want to point out that 8th sums to 137 in Jewish gematria. First, let's start with her first name, Alphonsa. Look at this. 39, 33, 93, 119. Very interesting numbers. You've seen 123 pop up a lot as well. That could be because killings sums to 123 and 93 as well. Her last name was Watson. Watson gives us 34 and 118, Francis Bacon. Now when we combine these, we of course get 59. That's one of the two numbers that are constantly stamped on black people in the media. 38 septenary. Also check this out, 193 reverse ordinal, we just talked about this number, and 213 in KFW. 213 being a number that's closely associated with death, as death in satanic gematria sums to 213. Also the word, well, the N-word in abbreviated form, 213. So it's interesting they chose this name here. They also say her nickname was Peaches. Peaches sums to 115 in one of our Kabbalah ciphers, and of course 33 in reduction. So she died. They say they found her at about 4:15 a.m. What's interesting about 4:15 is when you put this in the gematrinator, you get a 55 and 137, that 33rd prime number. And actually, if we throw in AM after it, see another 139, but perhaps more significantly, 223 in ALW. Oops. They took her to Johns Hopkins Hospital where she died. Very fitting place to die. This place has Gematria 96 like Freemason. Also, in our Jewish reduced cipher, 115. Also worth noting this 226. We talked about this, I typed it out, showed that it sums to 93, another number of murder. All 8 of these victims, they make it a point to say that these women were all of color. Not sure if I'm supposed to think something because of that. And I just want to throw in one of these quotes. They say that she was a very caring, passionate, fun person to be around, always in a talkative and playful mood. That phrase sums to 1093 in the KFW cipher, just like 193. Of course, 331 up here as well. Here we have a murder in El Paso, Texas. Seems like a simple case of one old man killing another, but one must admit, something really doesn't smell right about a man in his 60s stabbing another older man to death after an argument. Either way, again, I'm just pointing out that these printed stories, whether or not the event is real, are coded with loads of gematria and numerology that should make you question whether or not something else is really being said, and whether or not these policemen are really concerned about justice and protecting the public. So here we have an article written by Jesse Martinez, whose name sums to 74, 79, and 187. It's pretty interesting the people they choose to write these articles. Another name on here is Jamil Valencia, and this name sums to 322 using the prime cipher, and here we are on the date 3/22. This happened in El Paso. El Paso sums to 226 in Jewish, connecting us with murder. If we put TX after that, like the state abbreviation, we get two 112s, both in ordinal and in ALW. And the prime cipher, interestingly, gives us 377, just worth noting because this number is the 14 Fibonacci number, and the Fibonacci sequence is remarkably relevant. If we type out the full name of the state, El Paso, Texas, here we see the 33rd prime number once again, as well as 722 in the Jewish cipher. Both of these men were 61 years old, and 61 in the satanic cipher sums to 411, which is interesting to me. Freemason also 411 in that same cipher. The murderer in this story, allow me to scroll down here. I'm sorry, the man killed James Everhart. Of course, James, in satanic gematria, sums to 223 as well. Notice in reverse reduction this name is 33. The last name Everhart sums to 43, like killing in reverse. Also 97. I'm sure we're all familiar with this 119. But what about the 113? Again, a possibly misleading, dishonest mainstream news article. We're going to see this number again. His full name, James Everhart, sums to 55, once again. And I believe in the Chaldean cipher, yeah, we have a 44. Possibly coincidence, if you believe in those. The man killed, his last name was Woodruff, which gives us an 88 in ALW. Now, looking at this article, let's take a look at the tweets. Well, first of all, the attack actually occurred at 11:30 p.m. Again, like 113, the factors of 33. And here, this occurred in the 3900 block. We know how they love the number 39, but also see the tweet time, 1:39 p.m. None of this is a coincidence, folks. How about one of the witnesses, Nicole Bayer? Her name sums to 59, and what do you know, 113. Very strange. And let's look at this quote. She says it was 3 separate yells, but it wasn't distinct enough to catch my attention to know something was wrong. Strange, right? Well, again, in full reduction, This phrase sums to 383. We just saw this in another article. Murder equals 38 and 83 in reverse. The man was put up on $1 million bond. And this is fitting. 1 million also equals 55 and 118. And when we put the word bond after it, actually $1 million bond, there's another 311. Interesting stuff, Truth Seeker. Let's move on to New York City, Manhattan in particular, where this man, James Harris Jackson, is said to have slaughtered a homeless black man with a sword. Needless to say, this is just another piece of race war programming, a pathetic attempt by the cowardly Zionist Jews running our media to try to get black people to hate white people, in turn getting whites to fear blacks. Their only hope in continuing their tyranny over this country is to pit us against each other, because the minute we all turn our heads up and see what's really going on, they know it's over for them. I'm asking you, why are we still putting up with this? How does a story like this make any sense? A guy just decides one day he hates black people, decides to kill them, and then goes to the city with a sword? Prosecutors say he traveled from New York to Baltimore with a single intention, that of killing black men. What, are there no black people in Baltimore? I'm pretty sure there are. But if that was really his plan, what the fuck is he doing? Instead of using a gun and shooting multiple people, he just does one in and then turns himself in to the police? I mean, these stories are getting more and more ridiculous every week, and it's about time the pieces of shit giving us these news stories get removed from power, put out of business, and if they try to fight back, they need to be ended, demolished, kaput. I mean, if you still believe bullshit stories like this, you're a fucking retard. And you probably deserve to be ruled over by the piles of feces who run our banks and governments. Last I checked, we still have guns in this country. All it takes is for all of us to show up at the doorsteps of these satanic temples they call state capitals with our weapons on the same day, and this shit can be over. No more bullshit news, no more reality TV presidents, no more ritual killings of our friends and neighbors. There will come a time when it's too late. Our government is trying to arm their dogs, the police, with more and more military equipment because they know that we are on the verge of an awakening. We're going to have to start getting comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable. This means we need to put our cell phones down, hit pause on the Netflix, and start preparing for a reset. Each minute we bury our heads into an electronic device and ignore what's happening is another minute lost to the New World Order's agenda, an agenda that, as far as I can tell, is working, because if it wasn't, people would be on the streets by now. This all begins with preparedness, having food and water. Knowing you have enough food and water to hold you over a few weeks or a couple months, even better, is the first step to putting yourself in the right state of mind for a revolution. With those life essentials taken care of, you'll find yourself a lot more mentally adjusted for what needs to be done. This doesn't have to be a violent revolution, but the more time that passes before it happens, the more likely it will need to be. Alright. Moving on. Let's decode this horse shit and prove its lack of worth. So let's take a look at this guy, James Harris Jackson. First of all, the author of this article, Ashley Southall. She's probably 74 or 47. Here you go, 74. The man murdered in this case, his name is Timothy Kaufman. Let's punch this in. Timothy Kaufman, 227 reverse ordinal. Familiar number. See, this is bullshit. Just more coding, the same thing, every fucking story. The killer, James, first name, satanic gematria, 223, 33. Middle name, Harris. Notice all these white guys, they always have 3 names. It's so weird. Harris sums to 44. Also, 46, which is killing in reverse. Jackson sums to 44, and 318, satanic. Don't miss this 97, the other death number as well. His initials, JHJ. 17, reverse reduction. 44 KFW, and 133 in satanic. They say this man was 28 years old. If you're familiar with number gematria, you know 28 sums to the same as the number 33 when spelled out, 156 and 141 in reverse. Also, 28 equals 144 in KFW. 28 being the third perfect number. I'm sorry, the second perfect number. Timothy Kaufman, the man who got killed, this guy here, supposedly, was 66 years old. 66 sums to 59. There's that number, always stamped on black people once again. The police chief, Assistant Chief William Aubrey, as they refer to him here in this article, 137, single reduction, 33rd prime number. Also, 403, this is another number related to time. See the factors of 13 and 31. The number 144, the sum of divisors sum to 403, thus relating it to the passage of time. In this article, he says, I'm the person you're looking for. He just turns himself in, just says, I'm the person. All right? So this one, it looks like in Chaldean, sums to 115. They say he was carrying a 26-inch sword with an 18-inch blade. 26 plus 18, that just sums to 44. The kill number. What about this quote? After the arrest, they said he was very forthcoming with us, they said. He was very forthcoming with us. Here, 156, just like 33. And look at these two 33s in ALW and KFW. Very slick. Funny thing about New York, the current mayor, Bill de Blasio, in Jewish gematria, of course, 232. In trigonal, 666. Pretty wild, considering, again, Satan sums to 232. Their last mayor was Michael Bloomberg. He had 322 gematria. I mean, come on. So, the man who was killed lived in a homeless shelter. Of course, he was murdered. There's the number 93. And look at that, 223 KFW. This whole thing happened at 11:15. Remember how 115 has been so associated with all these killings here in 11:15. They refer to him as Mr. Kaufman, the victim here. Mr. Kaufman sums to 115. Also 123, our number for killings. And there was some video surveillance that they captured here. It was around 12:30 a.m., 123. Don't forget, in addition to killings being 123 in reverse, conspiracy sums to 123, which all of this is. And I had to laugh. They put him in this Tyvek suit. That's what they call this hazmat suit here, because apparently he was all bloody. What about the word Tyvek? Look at that, 83. And if we say it's a Tyvek suit, now we get 44 single reduction, 55 in reverse. Also, how about Tyvek suit? Oh, I'm sorry. This was reported by the New York Times, which, interestingly, in Francis Bacon, sums to 314. So this is a bullshit story, but the next one I'm about to talk about, probably not so much. The final story I'll be covering today took place in my hometown in Milwaukee, and this is really the whole reason I put this video together. The man killed on March 22nd in the inner city of Milwaukee happens to be the father of a coworker's friend, and the story was brought to my attention the next day. I want the viewers to realize I am doing myself no favors by making a video like this. By the time you watch this clip, my reputation in this world could be drastically different than the time at which I'm recording this. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't fully believe that this man's murder was a cold-blooded Masonic ritual done by the numbers. I've been studying this for years, I've known it to be true, and I feel like shit for waiting until it happened to someone just a couple steps away from me before I said anything about it. After reading this story at work, it only took me about 2 minutes of decoding before a switch was flipped, and I broke down and sobbed at my desk. This has lit a fire. So here's what the media is telling us about this story. Remember, just because this is local news does not mean it isn't run by the same group of Freemasons running roughshod over Washington, D.C. and the rest of the world. Our police chief, for instance, came from Massachusetts, Ed Flynn here, and probably brought more of his gang of East Coast Masons over here to make sure we play our role in the big stage show that is the national news. Greg Shishkevich was a building inspector for the city of Milwaukee who had to wear a bulletproof vest for his job. He was working in the inner city of Milwaukee on Wednesday the 22nd, visiting a property he had already been to recently, meaning police accompaniment wasn't required as it would have been had it been the first visit. At around 2 p.m., the police received a call for a welfare check of an individual slumped over at the wheel of his car. Officers arrived to find Shishkevich deceased after suffering a fatal gunshot wound to the head. Several hours later, 2 separate vehicle pursuits resulted in 2 crashes and 5 arrests. At least one of the vehicles had been stolen via carjacking. They believe these suspects were responsible for the murder because they used a shotgun to jack the car, and they think it was a shotgun that was used in the murder. That's the only reason they've given. Mind you, this happened in broad daylight in the middle of a city block. If someone fired a shotgun in the street, someone would have heard it. We have shot spotter technology here in Milwaukee, but apparently this did not pick the blast up. So this is a quote from Ed Flynn on the day of the killing. I'm not going to play the audio because it's very quiet, but he says word for word, "About that time, shots were fired, or heard, in the general area. We've got no reason to believe that gunfire was at all related to this incident. It was some blocks away. We haven't found a secondary crime scene or any other evidence." Let me explain that again. He said, around this time, shots were fired or heard in the general area. We've got no reason to believe that gunfire was at all related to this incident. Or that gunfire, anyway. It was some blocks away, and we haven't found a secondary crime scene or any other evidence. He goes on to say that they're still canvassing the neighborhood looking for eye or ear witnesses. So that's the story. Obviously, things aren't adding up, but it only gets stranger. This article talks about the aforementioned police chases. They say that the Toyota Venza crashed here at this site. Well, something definitely drove up and hit these objects, but the news got here too late, I guess. So we don't get to see pictures of the car, which is strange. Usually you would. This is long after all the police activity and everything is gone. There's no crime tape or anything. The second chase ended with the crash of a Kia Soul at 18th and Nash. This time we don't get any pictures at all. They just show the street signs. All right. It's likely the vehicles involved weren't really the kinds of vehicles we're told, which I will explain why in a minute. Anyway, of the 5 men arrested as a result of these chases, none of them had any history of violent crimes, with the exception of one assault and battery charge, and another one having been charged with armed robbery. But notice that all they say is that these guys were arrested for the crimes, not convicted of the crimes. The point I'm making is they are framing these guys to be dangerous, violent criminals. While they may be, that doesn't really appear to be the case. You see, here in Milwaukee, it's probably not all that much of a stretch for people to believe that some black kids randomly killed a white guy for his car and then not even steal the car. I'm sure you all saw what went down here last summer with the rioting that occurred not far from the shooting. But what I'm saying is that it is a stretch to assume that these kids just randomly shot this guy. There has been an increase of homicides in Milwaukee over the past couple years, but almost 90% of the victims have at least 6 prior criminal convictions, or at least arrests. I could be wrong on that, leading one to believe that most victims were targeted, that they had maybe gotten into some shit. Random murders are actually incredibly rare, especially in broad daylight, and this one isn't really adding up. So all of what I said is sketchy stuff, but let's do some decoding here so I can explain why I believe what I do. First, his name. Now, the same people who believe something because it's on Dr. Phil should also be the same people who believe something because it's on Wikipedia. So, despite the fact that I'm going to be using a lot of ciphers for this decode, do understand that these ciphers, several of them just come straight from Wikipedia, the English Kabbalah. There's 3 ciphers down here, one of which I'm not even using at the current time. And then they talk about prime numbers and trigonals. So those are all real ciphers, they're all in use, and they're all used in the news. First, let's begin with the name Greg. Here we have 17 and 59, like the words kill. One thing I should mention about all these ciphers is that, to me, this only proves my point more, because there's so many matches across multiple ciphers that the odds that these are coincidences are basically zero. The name Gregory has 93 gematria in ALW. His last name, is it Shishkevitz? This sums to 74 in single reduction and 115 in reverse ordinal, like killing, 74, 115. Greg Shishkevitz sums to 93 in full reduction, and if we use his full first name, we get another 115 in full reduction. Also notice the 83 in reverse reduction. What do I find interesting about the 233 is that in that same cipher, the city and state, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, also sums to 233. His nickname was Ziggy. Ziggy sums to 38. Remember 22 also, from the word dead. 74 ordinal. And I'm going to turn on the trigonal cipher. And this is what's really incredible, is that we see it's 777. And that's what this whole day is about. He was 33 years old. They made it a point in some of these articles to point that out in the headlines, which caught my eye immediately. He was also 64 years old. Now, if you remember, the word kill traces back to 64 in reverse. The 64th prime number is 311, the factors of 33. So that's another significant one. This came as the result of a supposed carjacking. Carjacking has gematria of 113 and 193, which again is the 44th prime number. In septenary, this is even 33. One of the first articles released, I believe this is the one where they first announced the death. Right here in the headlines, messed up, they put in quotes. Messed up sums to 330 in our prime cipher. It's always somewhere. He worked for the DNS, Department of Neighborhood Services. When we have capital letters like this, we have to use Francis Bacon to get the real gematria, and it's 115, again. Hopefully I've shown enough already, but there's plenty more. The next day after they announced the arrests of these kids, they put hours in caps here in the headline, and this confused me because are they bragging for making arrests in a homicide within hours? I mean, is this rare? I don't understand. So hours, also using Francis Bacon, gives us 211. We've seen this number several times. It's Mason, killing. The first car was a Kia Soul. So let's look at a Kia Soul here. Also, let's open up our trigonal and satanic ciphers, which we already have. So the Kia Soul sums to 34, 47, again 211 was the 47th prime number, and 88, the number that has to do with the cycle of time. Also in Jewish, 38 like murder. In satanic, 333, a highly significant Masonic number, as well as 112, which we've been seeing, and of course 64 again. This 731 here in trigonal, in the octal numbering system, the most important of all the alternate base systems, that sums to 1333. This is usually a stamp of Masonic behavior. The other car was a Toyota Venza. Toyota Venza, 47, once again, 144. Also 133 in reverse ordinal. One of the witnesses here in this, let's find this guy. His name was Kenneth Tate. Says he saw the crash near 27th and Hope. Well, Kenneth Tate sums to 42, and I can't help but wonder if whoever was writing this article chose that man's name. Since this is a primarily black part of the neighborhood, and we know how they love to stamp 42 and 59 on black men. 414 is the Milwaukee area code, by the way. It could be coincidence. I'm not sure. Another witness, and this one is weird. First of all, think about it. If Freemasons and the police or city government wanted to set this scenario up for a man to be murdered without anyone getting caught, then this is something that could have been arranged. And you may be asking, why? Why would they go through all of this work to kill someone? It's psychopathy, playing God, impressing your peers so you can get promoted. That's why. And to ignore the evidence I'm putting forth is an injustice to all of us. So, this guy's name is King Kodak, and King, if you're a real person, I'm sorry, but you have to think this is a made-up name. Think of how Kodak reminds you of photography, and here we have a witness who gives no valuable information, named King Kodak. And here's what he said. I heard a lot of sirens. I came out, and I don't know which way they were coming from. Just a great contribution to this article. This is just a joke. When I say they're mocking us every day, this is a perfect example. Pure mockery. What are we going to do about it? Right, moving on. They said that he was killed with a long-barreled gun, the way they phrased it. 74, 79, like murder. In our septenary cipher, we get another 55. Even the headlines that they've been, again, they put all these random phrases in quotes. The family was quoted as saying they had a tremendous amount of grief. And this is what I mean. The media is twisting the family that's mourning. They are twisting their words to match their geometric phrases. It's disgusting. They said, here's another quote. They observed the victim suffered catastrophic wounds and was deceased. In reverse reduction, this sums to 227. Are you tired of seeing this number yet? Because I am. Unfortunately, we're going to see it again right here. Go to the next paragraph. That's a little further down. I'm not going to find the quote right now. It's on this page, though, or one of these. He says, Ziggy would have known if it was time to get out of there. In single reduction, this sums to 227. Here's the quote, by the way. It's immediately after suffered catastrophic wounds and was deceased. So 227 phrases, one after the other. Coincidence? Come on. A few more phrases and quotes here. The DNS they say has highly trained special enforcement inspectors. Highly trained sums to 211. Once again, the 47th prime number. They also say that this was not a problem property. Not a problem property. Problem property, 8874. Once again. They say that Shishkevitz was eligible for retirement at the time of his death. Why is this in quotes? He either was or he wasn't. Why do you need to quote somebody? Well, this phrase gives us one of our favorites, 119, but also another, 227. 373 ALW. Remember this number, the 74th prime? They set up a fund for this family. It's at U.S. Bank, of course. Why did they choose U.S. Bank, huh? Could it be because it has 343 gematria? Do I need to remind you that this is 7 cubed? One of the last articles that they published here this week, again, twisting the family's quotes to geometric phrases that they like. He was a great man, the best man. Sums to 311 and 303 in our Kabbalah ciphers. I don't know if this is coincidence, 2017 trigonal. What's weird is that this is the gematria of George Herbert Walker Bush, 311, 303. So these are designed phrases, designed names to ensure that these sync up. And even the donation account at the bank, this is what they named it. They named it the Ola Shishkevitz donation account, 144, 93 Septenary. So I think I've shown enough. I'm going to bring this video to a close. I understand that there were many numbers strewn about. I did the best I could in the limited amount of time I have to organize this data so it could be consumed in a digestible manner. But to many of you, this may seem like an overwhelming amount of information. I assure you, keep your eyes peeled, and you are very likely to find numerical similarities in murders all over the globe. I hope that any police officers or anyone who knows a police officer think long and hard about what I just presented. Many of you know deep down that there is an incessant evil among your ranks. Many of you have questioned why some investigations are halted, and many of you have smelled rats within the department. I know because I've talked to police officers who have voiced some of their concerns to me. It's time that good police officers, however many are left, take charge, ask real questions, and take command of your station. Because people are getting fed up with this, they're learning more about what's wrong, and they're starting to get mad. You are not the enemy. The people you protect are the enemy. Remember, catching dangerous criminals and making your community safer are honorable acts. Nodding your head and following orders are not. Never let the book of laws cloud your better judgment. Just like me, you are your own ruler. Nobody owns you, and in fact, you will find the ones who think they do think far less of you than you could probably imagine. So thanks for watching. There's a good chance I just made living my life a bit more difficult down the road, so please don't just sit on this knowledge. Act, speak up, and let's end this bullshit New World Order before we're all obliterated in a third world war, okay?